Important story, this. Gangs of predominantly British, Pakistani, Afghan and Bangladeshi men have been raping vulnerable working-class white girls on an industrial scale, and the police have been too afraid of being called racist to act. And it's still happening. How many girls were drugged, raped, murdered or had their lives destroyed because of police indifference? There would be riots on the streets if this was happening the other way around. There would have been marches, demonstrations, it would have kicked off big time. Our left-wing politicians would have been falling over themselves to call it out in Parliament, and the police probably wouldn't have let it happen in the first place. In reality, there are serious questions over whether Labour tried to sweep this epidemic under the carpet. But no, because these girls are white and have had difficult starts in life, they're not seen as worthy. You know what? That's racism. Welcome to Britain, where working-class white girls can be treated as sex slaves, impregnated, put in cages and forced to act like dogs, battered, murdered and trafficked by gangs of predominantly British, Pakistani and other South Asian men, and the perpetrators are treated better than their victims. A damning new report, which comes after a series of other damning reports, reveals how local council officials and Greater Manchester Police left young girls to be brutalised. They ignored the warning signs. A young girl went to the home of a guy called Mohammed Yaqub. He injected her with heroin, apparently, and she died 5 days later. 3.5 years he got, cleared of manslaughter. Just 2 of 100 suspects were jailed. An Asian man who raped a 13-year-old girl didn't go to prison for that. No action was reportedly taken against a pimp who got a 15-year-old girl pregnant, while another child claimed that she was kept locked in cages and made to act like a dog or a baby, with, again, no action being taken against the men allegedly involved. One girl was threatened with a gun before she went to give evidence in a trial. Victims were worried about being kidnapped and sent to Pakistan, which is ironic because we've had real trouble sending some people back to Pakistan. Quarry Ralph, 54, Adil Khan, 53, were convicted along with 7 other men of grooming and gang raping 47 girls as young as 12 and pimping them out to other predators. They were given a few years in prison, naturally, told that they'd be deported, and here we are nearly 12 years on, and as far as I'm aware, they're still in the country. This is not just a few bad apples. Rochdale, Rotherham, Keighley, Newcastle, Aylesbury, Peterborough, Oxford, Bristol, Telford. And I will bet my bottom dollar that this is happening in every major town and city in the UK. Please lecture us more about white privilege and about racism. The only privilege here, as far as I can see it, is that that's been given to British, Pakistani and other South Asian men who can carry on with their lives as normal after raping young girls. The only racism here is towards the white girls who were seen as worthless. Now, I want to make a very important point here. There are paedophiles everywhere. People will be shouting at their television screens right now, saying, Jimmy Savile was white. What about the Catholic Church? Absolutely. And we should call every single one of those out, OK? But let's deal with today's report, OK? Let's deal with the matter in hand here. And the fact is that this country, for decades and still today, does appear to have a problem with certain elements of the Pakistani and Asian community abusing predominantly working-class white girls on an industrial scale. And our politicians and police have, in my view, been more concerned about not wanting to stoke racial tensions than they have been about actually sorting the problem out. Many people skirt around this issue, but is it not reasonable to have an open conversation about whether certain nefarious minority elements of the British Muslim community appear content to take part in a grooming gang epidemic? Our politicians and police, in many cases, traded the lives of young girls for an easier life themselves, in my view. I think that's shameful. I think it's a stain on Britain. And many people, I think, have blood on their hands. Now, before we get stuck into this with my panel, I'm joined by the voice on grooming gangs, this former Greater Manchester Police detective, Maggie Oliver. Maggie, I want to thank you very much for coming on. And I would just like you to explain, articulate to me a bit the importance of the report, why this means so much to you and the scale of the problem, please.
Hi, Patrick. This is not just a report. This is the story of many lives that have been destroyed. And I have been really insistent today to say that this is not just about Rochdale. This is a systemic problem. And I would like to broaden it beyond just the grooming gangs. This story took 12 years to be made public. Actually, sorry, not to be made public, but for the truth that I was speaking 12 years ago to be formally confirmed as being the truth. And throughout all those years, the police, social services, have pretended that that job was a great job for British justice. It should not have taken 12 years for this to be confirmed that it was a failed job, that dozens of victims were failed, that the authorities chose not to put resources into this. And,
why,
you know,
Maggie? That's what I want to know, though. Why? Because
I know.
It looks to me as though you've got vulnerable working class, predominantly white girls here who were seen as a bit worthless, and then you've got a lack of a desire to, quote unquote, stoke racial tensions by police forces, and so then nothing gets done. I mean, was I unfair and out of order there to say that I think there is some racism involved here, and maybe that was racism against some of these young white girls?
No, I think what I would say, Patrick, is I think that when I began speaking out, which was 12 years ago, I think very much there was nobody spoke about the ethnicity of the abusers in these gangs. And it is unavoidable to say that the vast majority of the offenders in the grooming gang scandals are predominantly white British Pakistani men. And the children are predominantly young, white, very vulnerable children from difficult backgrounds. I think that is unavoidable, and that was never discussed. But I think as well as the unwillingness to grasp that nettle and have an honest discussion about why it was going on, there is also a class dynamic to it. There is also, I've often said that if it was Boris Johnson's daughter being abused, this wouldn't have happened. These children have been judged as being not worth protecting. And what I've said today is that I actually believe that through programmes like the programmes that you've done on GB News, you know, the drama, I think that the cat is out of the bag in relation to these cases. So I don't think that the discussion is just about racial elements of this case. I am trying to bring it. This is the past, but it is also a problem of the present. And I want to see change, Patrick, for the future. And the only way we are going to get change is by changing the system, by preventing the police from pretending that these cases don't happen, by not putting resources in, by a lack of accountability, by proper resourcing. And I mean, today the Chief Constable was really insistent to say that this was a problem of the past. It isn't, Patrick, because in my foundation, in the Maggie Oliver Foundation, we are helping victims every day who are still being failed by the system. And I just want to make sure that you focus on the present and on the future as well as the past.
Absolutely, no, absolutely, 100%. This is still happening. In my view, it should be Dame Maggie Oliver. I don't know if you'd accept that very quickly, Maggie. Would you accept an honour?
It's never going to happen, Patrick. And you know what? If it did, I would think that, you know, I'm not a voice for the establishment. I'm a voice for the victims. And I want to see systemic changes. I want to see a police complaint system that is fit for purpose. And I want to see accountability, a chief constable in a court of law charged with gross criminal neglect of duty.
We're going to have to leave it there, Maggie. I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you very, very much. That's Maggie Oliver there, who's a former Greater Manchester police detective who stood up against all of this. Thank you very, very much.